From courtside of the virtual hardwood, it's the NLSC Podcast, a weekly show for basketball gamers and hardcore hoopheads. This is episode 603. Andrew with you once again, joined as always by my co-host Derek, aka D3. Derek, if I were a gambling man, I'd bet that we're going to have another great show today.
Yeah.
So with that being said, very smooth, right? Very smooth. So with that being said, please tip us off.
So yeah, we have a few main topics to go over on today's show, including tapping into two community questions that were submitted by listeners of the NLSC podcast. Bucky T asks, have you ever been ejected in a basketball video game? And if so, in what game and with what team? The other question was submitted by VF Baller, who asks if the current gambling situation that is rocking the NBA makes basketball video games more valuable. Basically, has it made you turn to basketball video games even more? However, before we get into those two topics, I feel the need to vent, Andrew. So let's begin today's show with a segment famously known as D's Dislikes.
No good!
So Andrew, my brother and I talked before the NBA season started and decided that we were going to give it a chance. Growing up, we never missed a Celtics game. So we wanted to give watching the Celtics on a game-by-game basis another chance. So we sat in front of our TV and watched their first regular season game versus the 76ers. This game was at TD Garden, and we watched it on our local broadcast, NBC Boston. First, I would like to say that the commentary crew of Drew Carter and Brian Scalabrine is a massive downgrade from Mike Gorman and Tommy Heinsohn. The knowledge isn't there, meaning no in-depth breakdowns, no discussion of strategy, etc. And any and all excitement felt forced and phony, including when Drew Carter said that the 76ers chipped into Boston's lead faster than a hiccup, Andrew. Drew Carter does okay, but he operates robotically. Scal is just annoying. So already from a presentation perspective, it was feeling pretty blah. However, the worst aspect of the presentation was the fact that on the court, there were fake advertisements that were on the TV. Again, they weren't on the real court. They were only on the TV. Large advertisements that stayed on the floor all game for Jason Stone injury lawyers and Experience Abu Dhabi, etc. When the players stepped on these fake advertisements, it looked like they were stepping in virtual water because it created a weird graphic effect. Just absolutely stupid, distracting stuff. It also felt like there were more commercials than ever. As it relates to the on-court action, Andrew, my brother and I could barely get through the game. Watching Tyrese Maxey, who scored 40, travel and carry all over the court was a miserable viewing experience. And it shows you how far and away we are from real basketball in the NBA today. Andrew, he would constantly catch the ball and take 2 or 3 steps before he took his first dribble. He would round corners with his hand under the ball and take like 3 steps before he put it on the floor. That's not real basketball. And he scored like 40 points doing this. I just wanted to shut it off. It was driving me absolutely nuts. Joel Embiid looked like he could barely get up and down the court. He went 1 for 9 with 4 points in 20 minutes. He is a massive man. He's a tall, wide body, and he was routinely shut down by Jaylen Brown and smaller players and made Xavier Tillman look like Hakeem Olajuwon on defense. I watched as Jaylen Brown would do pointless between the leg dribbles standing in place, attempt a first step to get to a spot, pick up his dribble and get stuck, which would end up in a wild shot or a pass out for a contested 3. I must have seen him do this half a dozen times. I saw players constantly pass up good looks in space to pass it out for a 3. I saw Neemias Queta be used for only about 3 minutes in the game. And in those 3 minutes, he was absolutely unstoppable because the paint was wide open. And if there was someone in there, they were oftentimes undersized and making no real play on the ball. However, Andrew, instead of continually using those actions to attack the paint and go at mismatches, I watched as the Celtics blew a lead by jacking up threes over and over again, often heavily contested and early in the shot clock. I watched a game where players looked incredibly limited anywhere inside the three-point line while also not shooting great from beyond it. I saw players like Sam Hauser, etc., where the only thing that these guys can actually do is shoot threes. And anytime they got inside that three-point line, they were looking to pass it out for another three. And if they did attempt a shot inside the three-point line, oftentimes it looked ugly and out of place. I also want to point out that the only highlight of this game was the rookie for the 76ers, VJ Edgecombe, who put up over 30 points and showed a ton of poise. He didn't look or play like a rookie at all. He looks strong. He's patient. He takes good shots. He did have a nice, sweet fadeaway, probably about 8 feet from the basket and in front of the rim. He was overall very impressive. He played a lot better than I thought he would. So, Andrew, that game just was an absolute mess. We didn't really enjoy watching it. However, what makes this even worse is we were going to give it another chance. We said we were going to watch the Celtics' second game of the season where they played the New York Knicks. And we put it on NBC Boston and it wasn't there. We're like, where's the game? And it turns out that the game is on Amazon Prime. And we would have had to sign up for Amazon Prime, either for the free trial or do a full sign up in order to watch our local team play. I'm not going to do that, right? Like, I've never had to do that before. I'm not going to sign up. I'm not going to sign up for Amazon Prime to watch them play. So we just didn't watch Celtics Knicks. But anyway, yeah, just a miserable experience watching that game overall.
Yeah, that's really disappointing because we both went into this season open-minded, hoping to enjoy the season, wanting to give it a go. So, yeah, not a good start, to say the least. That's really disappointing. The Amazon Prime situation reminds me a lot of NBA League Pass, the blackouts of local games. This season, I'm watching the NBA on Disney Plus because Disney Plus now includes ESPN, so I was able to get rid of the pay TV and just use the existing Disney Plus subscription much cheaper. So that's the way I'm going with it this season. I watched the opening night, and I enjoyed it. I thought there were a couple of good games. A lot of foul baiting going on. A lot of people pointing that out, Derek, especially SGA. A lot of foul baiting. You know, we don't want to see free throw shootouts. We talked about the problems with three-point shootouts in the past, and that's not fun to watch them brick threes, as you said, in that game. Reminds me of the 2018 conference finals where both the Rockets and Celtics shot themselves out of Game 7, just hoisting threes, missing them, not changing up, not taking it to the paint, you know, ironically, not getting free throws. That's a situation where you do want to go for the supposedly easier bucket inside or draw the foul. They were just hoisting threes, shot themselves out of the lead. That really should have been the end of the whole analytics movement, as I've said before. But yeah, very disappointed to hear about that downgrade with the broadcast. I did like the NBA on NBC broadcast. I'd have to agree with what a lot of people are saying, that it does feel like it's focused on basketball. You didn't have those hot takes from ESPN's coverage. ESPN's coverage really being put to shame by NBA on NBC. I've heard some good things about the Amazon Prime coverage as well, but it still sucks that they're forcing people in local markets to buy that subscription to black out the games like that. That's not a way to promote the league. Reminds me of a comment from Adam Silver during the off-season, where it almost seemed like he was making fun of the fans for having a problem with the cost of subscriptions for seeing the games. And seeing a lot of people toe that line and saying, oh, well, you're not entitled to watch the games, which I guess you're not. But when they're blacking out in local markets like that, that is very poor. And of course, he also called it a highlight league, which I think speaks volumes about the way people talk about the game, not actually watching the full games, just watching highlights, looking at the box scores, extrapolating from that. So that was very telling from Adam Silver in the off-season.
Yeah, highlight league where still most of the highlights are underwhelming. Sure. I just want to point that out. Like this entire game, I can't point to more than one or two really good plays that impressed me. I was too focused on Tyrese Maxey traveling and carrying all over the court. Embiid not being able to move laterally or get up and down the floor. A bunch of ridiculously contested threes being put up. I can't even point to any good highlights from that game. And he wants to call it a highlight league, but I think the highlights are the worst they've been in basketball history today, in my opinion.
Oh, for sure. But on the plus side, it does sound like Edgecombe was kind of fun to watch. And, we talked about our predictions last week, and we mentioned Cooper Flagg, the Rookie of the Year, kind of being his award to lose. Perhaps not the case.
Yeah, I would love to see Edgecombe make a run at it. He impressed me not only because of his on-court play, but just his overall demeanor. He seems like a good kid. I liked the way he handled himself during crunch time. I liked it how he wanted the shots. Also, he wanted to get fouled. He wanted to go to the line. He was trying to take shots in the last 5 minutes of the game that you don't usually see rookies, take because they're nervous or they want to give it to the team star, etc. So I was impressed with him overall. I thought he had a great game.
There's a comment I saw on Reddit. It's actually about wrestling, but I think it does apply to basketball as well, potentially. This person said that they have trouble watching wrestling today as opposed to when they're a kid. And of course, wrestling is often aimed at younger viewers anyway. But they said when they were a kid, a lot of the wrestlers were these larger-than-life athletes that you aspired to be. And now they're just kind of kids, or they're a younger generation. It's harder to admire them. Do you find that with basketball? Growing up, we were 10 to 15 years younger, at least, than the established stars of the NBA. So we kind of aspired to be them. Now, they're this younger generation. We're not looking up to them. Do you think that also plays a role in how we view today's players?
No, not really. I think that these players don't look superhuman anymore. I don't think that the personalities are big like they used to be. I don't think that the players overall are as impressive as they used to be, and I think that that shows with how the game is talked about today, and these players are talked about today. I think that a guy like Tyrese Maxey, can put up 40 points, but just the way he plays on the floor and the way he carries himself is not inspiring, right? At all. Same with SGA, and we're going to get into that in a second with my second D's dislike. I think, you have a former MVP like Joel Embiid who acts like he doesn't want to play the majority of the time, Andrew. He's trying to get out of playing. Or, you watch him and you look at his effort on the floor and it looks like he's just going through the motions. That's not superhuman. That's not inspiring. That's not going to inspire our youth, etc. You look at a lot of the stars in the NBA today, I find them to be very grounded as players. Players like Luka Doncic and, players like Devin Booker and the Trey Youngs and whatnot. They're grounded players overall, and you're not looking at these players in awe with a lot of things that they're doing, from an athletic standpoint or from a something we've never seen type of standpoint. Some of the most popular players in today's NBA have that superhuman element. Think about it. Steph Curry. Steph Curry is ridiculously popular because of his superhuman ability to shoot the ball, the superhuman ability to handle the ball. Wemby, so popular right now. Why? Because of the way he moves at his size. It's freak-like to the audience. Think about Giannis. Think about how he's built. He's chiseled. He's big. He moves so well for his size. Look how fast up and down the court he gets. He looks superhuman to the average person. You have a guy like Anthony Edwards. What's highlighted with him? His athletic ability, the way he can fly through the air, dunking on people, etc. So those are some of the players in the NBA today that do have a superhuman element, and look how popular those players are. So I think that just overall the personalities aren't the same. I think that the style of play is not as inspiring, and that gets me into the next D's dislike, Andrew. SGA's game. He won the MVP. He was the finals MVP. He won an NBA championship. It looks like they're trying their best to make him the face of the league, and his game is just absolutely unbearable. The fact that the league allows it is disgusting, and it reminds me of a lot of the issues that I had at the height of James Harden's career, the stuff they were allowing with him. But he is constantly traveling, constantly carrying, flailing all over the court. My opinion is There isn't a person out there who truly loves and cares about basketball or isn't an OKC or SGA fanboy that likes the way he plays and what he gets away with. Because people that really know basketball, people that really love the game, they know that it's not real basketball and it's damaging to the sport. He is not out there really competing. In my opinion, he plays like a wimp, like a coward. It's cheating the game. He falls down after almost every shot he takes. He wraps defenders' arms up in his own and flails in order to bait the refs. He is constantly breaking the rules and getting away with it. He would not get away with any of this at any other levels of hoop. And this next part is the truth, and this is what I want basketball fans to think about when you watch him play. If you ever had a player playing like this in a pickup game, you would shame him for it and tell him to get his ass up and stop being a wuss and to play real basketball. His game isn't good for our youth, and it's not good for the sport in general. So absolutely hate his game, hate what he gets away with. It's like the league is forcing him into stardom at this point by allowing this to go on for so long, to let him get away with this every game. There was a stat that showed as well, and a lot of this is just based off of his flopping, not even really getting fouled, not really competing, not being savvy, all of that stuff. He had shot more free throws than like 8 of the top NBA players this season combined.
Yeah.
In the first few games of the season. Combined, 8 players combined couldn't even equal his free throw attempt total. And it's just ridiculous. And I think that it's similar to what was happening with James Harden at one point in the late 2010s, where he was getting all of these ridiculous calls. Players were like basically putting their hands behind their back in order to be like, hey, listen, I'm not touching him. And still sometimes it felt like he was getting calls in those situations. But yeah, terrible for the sport. And anybody who really loves basketball knows this. And anybody who's ever played real basketball knows that it's BS and that you would definitely, absolutely 100% call him out if you were on the same court as him. So let's not BS with any of this. It's garbage.
So the perfect cover athlete for NBA 2K26 is what you're saying, basically. Yeah, 14.7 free throws per game as of recording. That is ridiculous. It is, of course, early days. That's through 3 games, so stats are often inflated early on and they peter out over the course of the season. But it does indicate how much he has been flopping and flailing and getting to the line early on. And the comparison to James Harden is very apt. In fact, another comparison I'd make here is people hailing him as the greatest offensive player ever. I've actually seen those comments, Derek. And I know social media is apt to young people throwing out ignorant takes and hot takes and recency bias and all that. But it's just so ridiculous, not just because of Michael Jordan.
Well, they were doing that with James Harden. That's what I mean, yeah. In the late 2000s. Yeah, they were doing that on ESPN. They were doing that during broadcast.
That was the hot take, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, and it's ridiculous because and it's not even just about the free throw attempts. I don't care if he took 5 free throw attempts a game. It's the fact that he plays like this.
Yes.
Right? And he's doing it all game, every game. And this goes back to my thing about the players from the past, looking like real competitors and looking superhuman oftentimes and being personalities that you kind of like looked up to and kind of wanted to, you wanted to be like those guys and you wanted to compete like those guys and you wanted to be the best. And then you see somebody like SGA playing that style of basketball. It's not even a style of basketball. He's playing like a wuss.
Right? Oh yeah, absolutely.
Like he's playing the refs. He's baiting the refs. He's not playing real basketball. And who wants to look up to that? Like, it's ridiculous. So it goes back to that question you asked earlier. I certainly don't. In fact, it makes me want to throw my TV whenever I see him doing it. Right. Yeah, so it actually pisses me off.
Yeah, it is hard to appreciate that style of play if you know ball, to your point. And yeah, that was the narrative around James Harden in the late 2010s. Like you said, that's what immediately came to mind when I saw those comments. And again, yes, it's recency bias and hot take culture, etc. But like you said, it is the style of play. It's also the lack of defense, how hamstrung the defense is these days. And even if you want to put that aside, you look at the great scorers through history. It's not just Michael Jordan, it's not just my bias for MJ, it's all the great scorers. Kareem, Kobe, Kevin Durant, even, I would throw out there. It's disrespecting their skill to say that players like Harden and players like SGA are so far ahead of them, so unbelievably more skilled than them. There have been so many skilled scorers, pure scorers throughout history. Look, I'll throw Melo out there. Carmelo Anthony as one of the pure scorers in league history. Did it result in team success? Did it result in championships? Admittedly not, but he certainly could get buckets. So it's disrespectful to all the great scorers to just point to some stats that are inflated by lack of defense, to bring that back into the discussion and say that Harden or SGA are the most talented scorers ever. I do think they have skill. I'm not trying to argue that they don't have any skill whatsoever. That would be ridiculous. But the most skilled ever? I must disagree with that.
Well, I want to point out too, though, and we're talking about gambling, we're talking about rigging and all of that stuff. I think some of this stuff does fall on league direction. It goes back to the playoffs of last year where Udoka said in a huddle, and it was captured on the mic, it goes, "Don't worry about fouling. They're not going to call anything." And they were talking about Steph Curry. And you routinely see Steph Curry constantly grabbed and held off the ball. And sometimes, when he's dribbling, driving, all of that stuff, and he never, ever gets any calls. But with SGA, you breathe on him and he flops and flails and he's getting these calls. That's league direction, right? These are professional
That's an all-time great
referees.
In Steph Curry. Yeah.
Right. But these are supposedly professional referees. When you see, some of these plays with SGA, the ref is looking at his feet while he's traveling. They're looking directly at his feet. They're looking directly at him when there's no contact, and then they'll still blow the whistle even, when he flails and whatnot. But it goes back to kind of league direction with that. It's SGA. This is how you're going to officiate him, and you need to be calling these fouls. That's the way it looks to me, right? There's no other way to look at it for me. And it also goes back to the 2006 NBA Finals, right? Where Tim Donaghy had stated that the refs were brought in to, basically be told what you need to call and how you need to officiate these players. And this is how you need to officiate Dwayne Wade, blah, blah, blah. And so suddenly Dwayne Wade's free throw attempts shoot up and he's getting all of these ticky-tack fouls. And meanwhile, it's not being called the same way on the other end. And you got to start questioning these things. And that, Andrew, gets us to the last of Dee's dislikes for this episode, the gambling scandal that is currently rocking the NBA, the one that involves Chauncey Billups, Terry Rozier, and Damon Jones, also involving former NBA player, now suspended, brother of Michael Porter Jr., Jonte Porter. Those are the players and coaches right now that are at the center of it. Andrew, the league deserves whatever bad press it gets. And honestly, if it stops the BS that is going on, I hope the case gets bigger and more people involved are named. This is what happens when you are constantly promoting gambling, when you constantly push and advertise betting apps. It's what you get when you have so much money in the game, but a lack of discipline and accountability. These players and coaches should want to crawl under a rock when they get caught for this BS, because they are throwing away their reputations, potentially throwing away their careers, and often throwing away money in the form of massive contracts and endorsements. And, it was talked about on our Discord that, this isn't the first, is the NBA rigged scandal that has broken. We had the Tim Donaghy scandal, right? We had the 2002 Western Conference Finals between the Kings and the Lakers, which was heavily questioned at the time and is still questioned today. We have the prior mentioned 2006 Finals between the Mavericks and the Miami Heat. We had the suspension of Draymond Green, right, in the 2016 NBA Finals. There are so many questions as it relates to what direction these players get, these teams get, the officials get. There's so many questions as it relates to outcomes that we've seen in the past. And then all of this stuff with the betting apps, with, players looking like they're actually throwing games, players like Malik Beasley, like Terry Rozier, top players being taken out in the last few minutes of a close game, strange cases of load management that don't make sense. You have the constant case of players being listed as probable and then at the last minute change to questionable and then change to out within like 5 minutes of tip off or something like that. And you got to start questioning, with all the money that is involved in this game and all of the influence and all of that stuff, how much is the league involved? How much are the players involved in it? The teams? How is it impacting outcomes? How much is it impacting real competition, etc.? The whole thing sucks. But honestly, I hope this case gets bigger and more is highlighted because I just want the BS to stop.
I suppose this would be a bad time to announce that our new sponsor is DraftKings, Derek, here on the podcast. But, to that point, you've got all this advertising for gambling, apps, sites, etc. And it's been pointed out that it's very hard for the media to comment on it, the talking heads to comment on it and say, oh, this is terrible, the integrity of the game, and then throw to an ad about gambling. So this does run deep, and it does throw a lot of things into question. And that's a shame, because we love the NBA, we love basketball, we want to believe that most things are on the level. We do know that there is that big market bias. We do know that there's been those situations where it's felt like the league has put its hand on the scales, but to outright rig these games and for them to be compromised, especially for gambling, yeah, that's really shady, that's really unfortunate. But to your point, if that's what's going on, and it certainly seems like it is, then yeah, the league absolutely does deserve the criticism. They deserve the action that's coming their way. They need to clean up their act, to say the least. But yeah, it is really disheartening, disappointing to think about all these situations that could have potentially been affected by gambling. And it's funny to see Gilbert Arenas out here throwing out all these comments when he was supposedly involved in some of this as well. Yeah, a few people thinking that Gilbert Arenas has been snitching.
I mean, Gilbert Arenas doesn't have a great track record as far as his reputation goes, right?
No.
So anything that he's involved in, or that it's reported that he's involved in, wouldn't surprise me in the least, whether it was gambling himself, being involved in the poker games that are in question, whether it be throwing games, whether it be snitching, anything that is reported that Gilbert Arenas is involved in wouldn't surprise me in the least. I already don't like him anyway, so none of it's going to change the way I feel about him. Honestly, I'm just never going to like him or his basketball takes.
Well, that actually goes back to the point about generations looking up to players older than us and not really admiring players younger than us. Gilbert Arenas is basically our generation, I believe a few years older than us from memory. And he was, for a time, entertaining. He had the chip on the shoulder, he'd come in, he was having games, he was dropping 50 and 60 points. He was overcoming what he felt was disrespect, certainly being overlooked in the draft, overlooked as a prospect, and succeeding, had that underdog energy, people kind of cheering for him because of that. But then just going up the deep end with these terrible takes, the more he played, just losing that support, all the ridiculousness with Crittenton back in the day as well. So I did kind of enjoy his antics for a while there, because he did have that underdog energy. He was entertaining to watch when he was dropping 50 and 60 points, although I did kind of turn on him a little bit in 2005 when he knocked my Bulls out of the playoffs after they finally got back there for the first time since The Last Dance. So for a while there, you could kind of cheer for Agent Zero. He even had the Agent Zero blog, back when blogs were a thing, on NBA.com. But yeah, over the years, just really soured on him, and I think a lot of people have.
Anytime you see a player play with a chip on their shoulder and you see them like really competing, that's always entertaining, right?
Yeah.
And the majority of the time, it's also likable, and it gets you motivated as somebody watching. It's similar to Isaiah Thomas of the Celtics, right? Last pick in the draft, played with a chip on his shoulder, ended up making a name for himself, ended up, averaging almost 30 points per game in the NBA at his height, carried the Celtics through the playoffs, or a couple rounds of the playoffs, et cetera. So similar in that way, you watched Isaiah Thomas out there and he played with a chip on his shoulder, and that was always exciting, right? And it was cool to see him succeed as well. But Gilbert Arenas, he was involved in the gun incident, did a lot of stupid things. And then ever since he's been retired, He has just been a nightmare in the media. His podcast sucks. The stuff he says is almost always BS. The way he craps on the history of the game, the way he talks ignorantly about it, absolutely hate listening to Gilbert Arenas.
Yeah, and to your point, Isaiah Thomas, a much more likable character. And I think with Gilbert Arenas, having that chip on his shoulder, being that underdog, it kind of became all of his personality as a player. And at a certain point, you kind of got to get over it, I think. It's like, you are here. By all means, still be a fiery competitor. We'll still cheer for you then, but you're still acting like you've got that chip on your shoulder, even when you're no longer the underdog. I think he kind of did burn some goodwill there. And then, of course, the gun incident and the remarks he's made in retirement. Yeah, I think just burned the rest of the goodwill, with me at least. Before we go on, a reminder that the NLSC podcast comes out every week on the NLSC, me-live.com, as well as our YouTube channel. We're also on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and other podcast apps. If you're listening on any of those apps, we'd greatly appreciate a review. To keep up with the show and everything we're doing with basketball gaming in general, connect with us on social media. On Twitter and Facebook, we are the NLSC. We also have an Instagram, NLSC Basketball, and on YouTube, we're youtube.com/NBA Live Series Center. Once again, visit us at nba-live.com, where in addition to the podcast, you'll also find all of our original content, as well as our forum and modding community.
So let's get to the mailbag, and the first question that was submitted by VF Baller, loyal listener of the show, has his own podcast, which he does a great job with. We appreciate him. He wanted to touch on the gambling scandal. So he stated, do you find that basketball video games hold more importance due to the gambling situation in the NBA right now? He stated that he feels more inclined to respect the video games more than the actual real life sport. So I'll answer this one first. Playing NBA 2K26 or any of the new 2Ks where they are absolutely cluttered with gambling mechanics, microtransaction BS, etc., that doesn't make me feel better about anything, to be completely honest with you, because the game in itself encourages gambling, and I think that it's a poor example to set for our youth, just like the real life gambling situation. And NBA 2K is targeted at teenagers, kids and teenagers and young adults. I also want to point out that VF Baller doesn't just play the newest 2Ks. In fact, the basketball video games that he plays are often the classics. So he's playing like NBA Live 08, NBA Live 06, the old March Madness games, etc., and games that are no longer online and that were also more fair to the gamer. Games like NBA 2K14, some of the early 2010s 2Ks, etc. So he can turn to those and get good vibes and get good feelings and have a good experience. And maybe he would rather do that than listen to anything about the current NBA, or instead of tuning in to the current NBA. So I absolutely see where he's coming from there.
I mean, I think in general, video games have filled that void for me in recent years, not enjoying watching the current product, the current NBA, as much. So obviously they are filled with gambling mechanics, like you say, and advertising and all that cynical stuff that doesn't make us feel good about the games, real or virtual. But I do think that basketball games have filled a void for me, really catered to that love of basketball, and I'm now going back and watching some more classic games again, like I used to, getting back into that and really loving it, as I said on a previous show, and as we've talked about off air as well, that is satisfying my love of basketball. But yeah, games have definitely also been a part of that. Hitting the virtual hardwood instead of watching the real NBA, I do think has satisfied that craving for basketball, that love of basketball. So I get where he's coming from.
Yeah. What it does for me and my brother, actually, is it allows us to go back to a time where we really enjoyed basketball, right? Where we really enjoyed the NBA, where we were big fans. And, we go out on the virtual hardwood and we can use the players that we watched growing up, or the players that, played at a time where we believed basketball was in a better state and where we liked the direction of the league. We can go back and play NBA 2K14 PC and use a retro season mod, and I can, throw Jason Williams out there and Tracy McGrady and Vince Carter and Kobe Bryant and Kevin Garnett and Dirk Nowitzki and, and Chris Webber and Shaq, and boy, just the list goes on, and Allen Iverson and all that stuff. And I can get that 2000s fix, right? Or, we can go back and, experience the 90s again, and now we're playing with Clyde Drexler and Michael Jordan and Glenn Rice and Mitch Richmond, Hakeem Olajuwon, David Robinson, Charles Barkley, Patrick Ewing, John Stockton, and whatnot. And then you can go back even further to the 80s with some of these mods, whether it be playing 2K19 or NBA 2K14, 2K13, etc. And now, we're using the Showtime Lakers with Magic Johnson and James Worthy and Kareem, and we got Larry Bird, Robert Parrish, and Kevin McHale out there, and then we got Larry Nance with Walter Davis, and then we got Mark Aguirre and Rolando Blackman and Derek Harper out there with the Mavericks, etc., etc. We got Irving and Barkley together with Moses with Philadelphia, and man, it's awesome, right? Because when you're using those mods or you're playing games from those times, you're not thinking about the current NBA product. You're not thinking about the gambling. No. You're not thinking about the state of the current NBA. You're lost in that time again, right? And a time that you really, like the direction of the league. A time where you were looking up to the stars, where you were wowed by the stars, where you loved those personalities and you loved the way those players, got out there and competed and whatnot. So yeah, I absolutely see where he is coming from. So like right now, as I told you, we put down NBA 2K26 and, we're modding a classic teams roster on NBA 2K14 PC. We played 3 games of an all-time fantasy draft league on NBA 2K19 today. I revisited NBA Live 2000 the other night. We have a season on NBA Live 06 PC as well. But yeah, we love those times in basketball. So why not revisit them constantly? And that's what we do.
Yeah, I've really gotten into playing with the Legends teams in recent years and historical teams. I was so hooked on my career for so many years, as I've said before, that I kind of neglected the classic teams. Always appreciated them, did play with them from time to time, but now that I'm leaning towards retro gaming, dusting off old titles, I love playing with the rosters of the time, obviously. I love that interactive almanac aspect. There's that word again, because I love it so much. But playing with the legends in any game that has them, really enjoying that. I'm playing some NBA Live 19 at the moment, playing some Ultimate Team. I'm actually playing through challenges that will get me some Legends cards, specifically targeting the challenges that involve Legends, either playing against them or earning them, and certainly playing with my team of Legends. I don't have any then-current players in my active lineup. In fact, I'm playing with a lot of players from before my time at the moment. Bill Russell, Wilt Chamberlain, Julius Erving. Of course, Julius Erving was playing when I was alive, but I was 3 when he retired, so didn't really watch him growing up, obviously, except in highlights. But I do have that appreciation for NBA history, as you do too, you and your brothers. So going back and playing with those legendary players from those legendary seasons, not just the ones that we remember growing up watching basketball, but the ones that we saw highlights of, the ones that we read about, saw recaps of. Yeah, just playing with those legends of the game is great on the virtual hardwood, and it's something I'm enjoying a lot more than playing the latest game with current rosters.
So let's get to the responses. Once again, the question is, do you find that basketball video games hold more importance due to the gambling situation in the NBA right now? Joshua Grant at Joshua Grant 7750 states that the NBA and 2K are both responsible for many youth being exposed to gambling at a young age. That will have negative impacts on them. I also think if similar situations like what happened this week in the NBA keep happening, the integrity of the league will come more into question. I think it's already into question, number one. Number two, he makes a great point, like we already stated, about the newest NBA 2Ks, since microtransactions and gambling mechanics have become involved. But my response to him was, once again, don't forget the classics. We can turn to those, and we can turn to mods as well and relive better times.
Oh, absolutely. And we've talked before about the situation with the gambling mechanics and the pay-to-win and the pay-to-enjoy in NBA 2K. and people can say that it's optional all they like, but the pressure is definitely there, and we've seen how much people spend on the game, and how much young people spend of their parents' money on the games, so it definitely is problematic.
Stephen at the Live King states, I think so. I try to mimic today's game with old school gameplay. I also turn down the file sliders now. And yeah, I've been doing that. Live King, it creates a smoother experience on the court. The pace is better. You don't have as many interruptions, etc. And then lastly, he states, no SGA whistle in my games. Mike P for free at Mike Purchard states, I honestly hate that the NBA advertises the parlays, etc., and apps during NBA games. The gambling is out of control, and we completely agree. And Royce at Royce Brink 14 states, I do feel the integrity of the league is in question, but a video game is playable by the player or user, so we control the action, if you will, or try to in the case of 2K's recent releases. I have also felt that video games are important because that is all some people have. He continues, some fans can't make it out to the games live with economic and other factors in play. The video games can be rented, bought at low prices sometimes, and played again and again like the NLSC community does. Also, that is among the reasons for the joy of gaming. Games don't have a like sell-by date like food does. Yes, games, consoles, PCs break down, don't work anymore and such, but the games can be played again through various ways and means. Look at the court, roster, scoreboard, and such updates made by the community for games. About the integrity of the game, look, we have all seen or heard things that made us wonder, yeah, that sounds shady in basketball and elsewhere. This is not a surprise in my honest opinion, but it does sound the alarm and should make us not so easy to fool. Will it do so? I don't know. I hope so. Another factor is we don't know everything yet. When it all comes out, then we can go from there. Maybe basketball will go back to being the fun game to watch and play. If anything, this whole situation makes me appreciate basketball's past and games past even more. So, thank you for your time and attention to this matter. Keep on playing and creating. The NLSC, D for 3, and Andrew, please keep us up to date on the real and virtual hardwood. Thank you from a member. Also to everyone, don't let this ruin the game, virtual or real for you. And I appreciate that last message. Thank you for supporting the show, Royce, and always interacting with our community questions. But yeah, it's tough for a lot of people to have this not ruin the game for them, right? I think that it is a dark cloud over the NBA, not only the gambling situation, but just kind of, the load management, the style of play, will the stars play? How many injuries are we going to deal with? How many teams are tanking? Why is the regular season seem like such a slog, et cetera? I'm only going to watch during the playoffs, et cetera. There's a lot of issues, in my opinion, right now with the league, and I think that it's hard for people to overcome that.
Yeah, the passion isn't there like it was when we were growing up watching this beautiful sport of basketball. Shout out to Royce, as always, and thank you for those very kind words. They're very humbling and definitely encourage us to do our best with all of our content. And like he says, video games do make basketball and the NBA accessible for everyone. Obviously, growing up in Australia, I couldn't attend games. There was only so many games I could watch. With free-to-air back in the day, Channel 10, my favourite channel back in the day because it had NBA, WWF, and The Simpsons, but I only had the game of the week that they showed. And often they were showing it late at night, actually. They weren't even showing it live. They just picked one of the games and showed it during the week. And in fact, during the 1998 season, The Last Dance, when I wanted to watch as many games as possible, they were actually showing abridged versions of games during that season. Even though they weren't live, even though they could cut out all of the ads, or cut down on the ads and timeouts and so forth, they're actually cutting out some of the action. So that was a bit disappointing, to say the least, when they started doing that. But yeah, the NBA is not always accessible to everybody. As you pointed out, Derek, you're living there, in a large market. You do have a local team, basically, with the Boston Celtics, and you're having games blacked out because of this new broadcast deal with Amazon. So yeah, games absolutely do make basketball more accessible. And as we've talked about before, it's often how we learned about the players growing up, and who was on what team, and the deep bench players. Basketball cards as well, of course. But basketball games have been that great learning tool over the years to learn about the league, and yeah, make it more accessible.
Well, I really don't want to watch the Celtics anyway, but I do feel bad.
It's the principle, right?
in our local area. Exactly. Moving over to Discord, QB1120 states, NBA 2K is full of gambling-like mechanics to give you that hit of dopamine to get you addicted and coming back for more, and to pay additional real money. Not to mention opening packs of fake cards that are completely random. And again, he's right. And we're not saying that the new NBA 2K has a positive influence on people. It's loaded with gambling mechanics. It's loaded with microtransactions. But again, as I stated prior, and as VF Baller kind of alluded to, there's classics. We're also talking about basketball video games that are no longer online. We're talking about games that were more fair to the gamer or didn't have gambling mechanics at all. Juicy Shack Meat states, it doesn't change for me. I can imagine bad actors can still enter the virtual hardwood as long as there's money on the line and in a competitive setting. Betting platforms nowadays even cover non-sports like reality TV and professional wrestling, so I'm inclined to believe video games aren't safe either. Yeah, I mean, you can probably speak to the professional wrestling piece, Andrew.
Yeah, there's people that are actually betting on professional wrestling. And of course, I suppose you can bet on anything where there is going to be an outcome, scripted or otherwise. I remember back in the day with The Simpsons, Who Shot Mr. Burns, the two-part episode where Mr. Burns was shot by Maggie. Spoilers for a 30-year-old episode, and 30 years, wow. But yeah, people can gamble on pretty much anything. Professional wrestling having the veneer of being a sport, being a simulated combat sport, essentially, there are still outcomes that people can bet on. But it's even crazier there, because obviously those outcomes can and do change on the day of the show, when the bookers decide, oh, we're going to have somebody else win, we're going to go a different way with the story. So if people want to throw their money away, and I suppose that goes with gambling in general, but yeah, there's not a lot that people won't bet on.
So thank you again to VF Baller for submitting that question. Had a lot of interaction. And yeah, I'm glad that you have the classics that you can turn to, because you seem to be having fun on the virtual hardwood. To end the show, we're going to get to our last community question, which is submitted by Bucky T. He states, have you ever been ejected in a basketball video game? And if so, what game and how did it happen? So I just want to point out that I haven't been ejected, but I did get a technical foul. And I've talked about this probably like 200 episodes ago on the NLSC podcast. I was playing NBA 2K14 for my Xbox One, and I had the Kinect hooked up. Did not realize that the Kinect was picking up my voice, and I was in a close game against the PC, and I let out an F-bomb, and I got teed up. And that's because the Kinect picked up my voice, and I swore. So they ended up getting a free throw, and I lost the game. It was right at the end of the game. So not an ejection, but yeah, I got teed up. My brother Nick did get ejected in a game for picking up 2 flagrant fouls with Kevin Garnett. I believe it was on NBA 2K19, and I believe he had to exit the game in the third quarter. So yeah, those are the 2 instances that I can think of.
I also got hit with the technical issue in NBA 2K14 when I installed it on my PlayStation 5, forgot that there is a microphone in the controller, and forgot to turn off that setting about voice recognition in the game settings. So, like you, I had a situation where I muttered quite loudly an F-bomb after something happened on the court. Don't remember quite what it was, but it certainly wasn't to my liking what happened, and let loose with a bit of profanity, and was reminded of that feature. Oh, that's right, if you swear into the microphone and there is a microphone there on the controller, that's how that happened. I have been ejected in my career games as far as fouling out. Not with flagrant fouls, but hitting the foul limit, which is kind of different, I know, but I have been thrown out of the game, had to have my players sit out the rest of the game, simulate to the end because of that. And also in the online arena, in both 2K Pro-Am and the Rec, there is the teammate grade, as in my career, and it's used for fairness to your teammates online. If you hit an F grade in the online scene, you get kicked from the game out of fairness. Whether they're not performing well or deliberately sabotaging the game, it will kick them once they hit that teammate grade of F. And unfortunately, the teammate grade logic does leave something to be desired, like a lot of things in 2K over the years, so a couple of mistakes really dropped the grade too quickly, and I got kicked from the game, had to shoot around in the team arena while the rest of the guys finished the game. So I guess that counts as an ejection as well.
I also want to recommend following Bucky T, who submitted this community question. He's T Gentry at Bucky_T on X. Give him a follow. He shares box scores sometimes from his sessions playing video games. He will share highlights. He often enjoys the classics. I know that right now he's playing NBA 2K25 in an edited 2003 roster that I sent him, the Kobe era, and he's having a blast with that. But yeah, I love the way he plays. Him and I think very similar about these basketball video games and the state of them. So please give him a follow. He stated that he recently had a game where he was using the Pelicans and he was facing the Spurs. Zion caught a weak flagrant late in the first quarter. Then the start of the third, he was hit with yet another, which Bucky T stated he admitted was a hard foul and was ejected afterwards. And the Spurs crowd let Zion have it. I think it's cool, right? I think that the fact that you can pick up 2 flagrants like in real life and get ejected, and that there's a reaction to it. Yeah, that's awesome to have in video games. It's even better when it happens to a player that you could see in real life getting ejected for flagrant fouling, right? Like if you were playing a video game and you did that with, like, say, Rasheed Wallace, it'd be like, that's realistic, right? When my brother did it with Kevin Garnett's a super emotional player. Right, he played with so much emotion. You could see Kevin Garnett getting 2 flagrants and getting the see you later. Right, you're out of here. So I do find that cool.
Yeah, and obviously the NBA is very image conscious, always has been. So it's been a bit wary about things that it puts in games. There's no fighting. There's no unsportsmanlike technicals. There's just that technical on the bench for swearing into the microphone in NBA 2K14, kind of a bonus feature. So the fact that they do represent flagrant fouls, because they do happen. Not always intentionally, obviously, the flagrant ones being the example here, but the fact that they do allow that in the game is good. It is authentic that they do that.
Mike P for 3 at Mike Pritchard states, okay, so me and my mates were not ejected as such, but back playing NBA Live 98 in our Rockets pajama jersey season, where you hand check, aka push your defender, and my friend came in to check John Stockton hard, full speed, but missed and hit Sam Mack with Barkley, injuring him as a result. You got to love the old NBA Live pushing, right? It was unrealistic. The game sorely needed, like a functional steal button. But the best way to get steals was oftentimes to ram yourself into the opposition, knock them to the floor, and hope that they wouldn't call a foul. And then in the case with like NBA Live 98, you did have a dedicated steal button, but you also had the push button, right? And it was very tempting to extend both your arms and push somebody and hope to get away with it. Maybe a player that you didn't like and whatnot, and maybe jar the ball. However, oftentimes in that game, they will call the foul.
Yeah, big development when NBA Live 98 was a Windows release, just a Windows release, no DOS release, so they actually were able to take advantage of controllers with 4 buttons or more. Yeah, a massive improvement to the controls in the PC version. And I'm sure, Derek, that all of us who grew up with the 16-bit versions of NBA Live and the PC ports as well relate to running into somebody at full speed, sending them flying across the court, they fall down on their ass, they get up, they shake their heads, and it comes up injured for quarter or injured for game. I think many of us have a lot of memories of that.
Oh, yeah. And we did that a lot back in the day. I think the best part was, though, is that sometimes you could get away with it.
Yeah.
You push them, they go flying 10 feet out of the way. They're sitting on the floor. There's a no call. You run down the other end and you throw an alley-oop or throw it down or whatever. I always found that amusing with the super old NBA Live games. Moving over to Discord, Vetman states, I'm pretty sure I've gotten 2 flagrants in a 2K game and gotten ejected, probably 2K22, and he stated probably with Draymond Green. And again, when it happens to a player that, it could happen to in real life, that just makes it better. Ja Pupil states, I think I ended up getting ejected in 2K15 on the 360 a while back. I was playing with a Kinect, and it thought I cussed when I was trying to call a play on 2 separate occasions and gave me technicals. He continues, not an ejection, but I've gotten flagrants twice in Live 2001, which seemed to be a pretty rare occasion because I can push people all day and not get a flagrant. And he states, the first time I was using Steve Nash, Tim Hardaway got away with a hand check. I got pissed and pushed him back. He got hurt for the rest of the game. It was the fourth quarter, 2 minutes left, and I got a flagrant. Yeah, the thing that sucks is when the injuries happen to you. right?
Yeah.
And there's certain video games where the injury duration is way too long. And whenever somebody gets hurt, it seemed like it was long. Because of that, oftentimes my brothers and I, we turn injuries off in our seasons because it's like, why are we going to put this team together and end up having injuries that knock out our best players more often than would happen in real life, for weeks, sometimes months, maybe for the entire year.
Oh, yeah, and we do the same with exhibitions as well, because you just want to have that fun exhibition, all the players available, make highlights, make some fun memories, so turn the injuries off. I do like having them in the season play, though. When I'm playing with real rosters, it does spice up the season. My NBA Live 06 Dynasty, the first year of that, was made more interesting by the fact that I lost Ben Gordon for 20 games with a broken wrist. It was a big development when we had injuries that carried over from game to game. I think there was a couple of games that actually beat NBA Live to the punch with that back in the day, but it was always funny when players got injured during a season and the duration of the injury didn't match up to the injury that they received. So you see somebody like broken back out 5 games, or you see someone with broken finger out for the rest of the season. Sometimes it was a bit random. They've improved that over the years, but that's one of the things in old games, like generated rookie names. I posted one in our Discord and on social media over the weekend, Felton Ostertag, in a simulation of ESPN NBA Tonight 2002, which I'll be covering next month in Wayback Wednesday. But I do like those aspects of old games. I'm glad that they improved, that they did make it more realistic. That's what I wanted to see as a sim head, but there's a charm to that when you see it in old games.
Under Shaq states it was the CPU, but Dwight Howard got ejected from an All-Star game exhibition for picking up a second flagrant. I don't feel like 2K has ever been able to differentiate All-Star gameplay from regular game intensity. I agree with that, but I also want to point out that over the last few years, they did allow park dunks and park moves to enter the NBA All-Star game to kind of give it a little bit of a different feel. So they did try that. For example, a highlight that was submitted for the NLSC Top 10 by Andrew the X, Alex English goes up for an alley-oop, and he brings the ball under his legs with his head at the rim and then throws it down. That would never happen in a regular NBA game, but they allowed that park animation in the NBA All-Star game. Also, Alex English couldn't jump like that. He was not known as a super athlete in the NBA. So it was kind of a weird highlight, but at the same time, it was an awesome one. And even one person stated that they thought that should be the number one play that week because it did look really cool.
Yeah, that's something else about the All-Star weekend, the All-Star game in particular, in games. I remember playing it back in the day during season mode and being annoyed that the CPU didn't substitute like an all-star game. The deep bench players often wouldn't get into the game. I'd often have to switch to the other team and try and make sure everybody played just so that it was actually resembling an all-star game where everyone was getting into the game, because it was using the normal substitution logic where the deep bench doesn't get into the game until garbage time, if at all. So I do like that they've improved that. I do like that there's a bit more of an all-star feel. And of course, All-Star Weekend in Live 2005 through 09 was really special. And jumping over to Facebook real quick, John says, the best I did was a flagrant foul 1 in NBA 2K24. So yeah, it seems like for a lot of us, we've really had to go out of our way to get that ejection or even a flagrant foul. But back in the day, again, Live 95 through 97, the 16-bit era, just sprinting into somebody full blast down the court, especially if you did have the handshake button, you could certainly injure a few players with the flagrant fouls.
John, you need to just go at him harder. And if you could, really foul SGA. How about that? Give a flagrant foul to SGA, hit him hard, and maybe he'll stop flopping. I also want to point out really quick before we close the show, players like Reggie Miller flopped back in the day, right? We remember him taking threes, and every now and then he would fall down afterwards, trying to fake contact. Jordan even came out in a statement at one point and stated that he didn't like Reggie Miller because of the flopping and the flailing and whatnot. But volume matters here. And I've watched full games recently of Reggie Miller, and he goes entire games without flopping once. In fact, the flopping is very rare with Reggie Miller, even though he had a reputation to do it at times. The SGA stuff, that is going on all game, every single game. Right. There was a compilation related to one of his most recent games showing like 6 or 7 different jump shots that he fell down on with no contact, where he took the shot and then fell immediately after to pretend like contact happened in order to try to get the call. Volume matters. Context matters. I think flopping in some form has always been part of the sport, but not to that level.
Yeah.
And the SGA stuff, the James Harden stuff prior, just all the BS we see in the NBA with it now, it's just gotten out of control.
Yeah, a lot of people don't take that volume and context into consideration when they're making that argument. And you see it with video games as well. You see something really ridiculous happen in real life, and people say, oh, if it happened in NBA 2K, people would be up in arms and they'd complain. And the point is, yes, it should happen very rarely. If it's happening all the time, and if it can happen very conveniently for the CPU in particular, that's when it becomes a problem. So, yes, volume and context absolutely matters.
Same thing with the skating and sliding in old video games. So you have a game like NBA 2K16, and there may be every now and then a instance of it. The volume is incredibly low, but it happens every now and then. But with the 2K since NBA 2K18, the skating is constant. The sliding is constant. The foot planning is terrible, and it greatly affects control in a major way. So you can't, that's apples and oranges comparison. You can't just say, well, they're skating in both games.
Yeah.
Their skating has always been a part of them. Context,
they make that argument.
Context matters. Well, usually they're shills that do that. But the point is that it's apples and oranges. The context matters.
So thank you to everybody who weighed in on this week's topics. Always great to hear from the community and have you as part of the discussion. As we wrap up here, this is Halloween week. Derek, Halloween, is that a thing? If not, maybe we can trademark it. Perhaps not. But we do have some fun content coming out. The Friday 5 will be Halloween themed. I will have a Tales of the Virtual Hardwood going live at midnight on Halloween. And you, Derek, are also doing something special for Halloween this year.
Yeah, it's something we've done every year related to the NLSC Top 10. We'll just do the Halloween special, so it'll be Halloween themed. So if you have any highlights that could go along with Halloween, maybe using mods, maybe using cheat codes for past games, etc., don't hesitate to submit those, because it would be cool to have them in the countdown.
And of course, that will be going live on Halloween at 7 a.m. Eastern Time, so on the Friday rather than the Saturday this year. With that being said, that has brought us to the end of this week's show. Thank you for tuning in, and a reminder that you can join us each and every week on the NLSC, our YouTube channel, and wherever you listen to podcasts. In the meantime, we invite you to connect with us on social media. So Derek, go ahead and plug the handles.
You can reach me on X, formerly known as Twitter, at D43G and at D4384. I'm also on the NLSC, D43, and on YouTube, D43.
As for me, I'm Andrew in the forum, and Andrew NLSC on X and Blue Sky. The NLSC is on X, Facebook, and Blue Sky at the NLSC. We're also NLSC Basketball on Instagram and Threads. We're on YouTube at NBA Live Series Center. And of course, keep it locked to the NLSC itself, nb-live.com, for all things basketball gaming. So, thank you once again for tuning in, and until next time, I'm Andrew.
And I'm Derek.
Go get buckets, everyone.